yeah, you could not turn around in that. Like, you couldn't stand up. You had to, like, kneel and crawl. Oh, awful. So claustrophobic. And to make things worse, it was pitch black. I'm not doing that. Do not think so. And just to, sprinkle a little bit of something else, it would be really smelly. So it would smell like, wet dirt. That was nothing, though. Decomposing bodies and death. I do my best to fact check everything I share, but please don't take any action based on the information here. And definitely don't quote me in your dissertation. Also, some viewer discretion is advised. Some stories may include graphic or potentially triggering content, so please take care when listening. And if I laugh at any point, just know it's never at the history or the people involved. Sometimes I just get a little awkward, or the drama is too wild not. Hello everybody, and welcome back to History in High Heels. If you are a visual listener and you're watching on YouTube, I don't have any makeup on today. Okay. So if you see my glasses marks, mind your business, guys. They are crazy. People who wear glasses, those little marks that you get on either side of your nose. Mine are like red raw right now. Anyway, so today I will be using my phone for notes. So if you think I am on my phone being antisocial, I'm not. It's November, baby. We're in November, mid-Nov. Have you started your Christmas shopping yet? Like a month until the crazy festivities begin. And that leads me on to say that we're probably halfway through, if not slightly more halfway through, our first season 1. But today's story, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's kind of grim. It's a little squeamish, but I will give you a warning when we're going to get into the gruesome squeamish bits, because I feel like I kind of have to. Let's go. Who's ready and excited? I'm going to try and save all the nasty gruesome bits for towards the end, so that anybody that doesn't like squeamish gruesome bits, you can just skip, you can just skip the last bit and you can still have your podcast episode of the week. Thank you very much. I thought about this because I am squeamish myself and I don't truly know how this episode is going to go. Got thirsty. Imagine walking through a jungle where every single step feels suspicious. Not because it's gory or gross, which it probably would be, let's be real, like bugs, ew, but because the entire landscape was actually engineered to trick you. The Vietnam War was unlike anything US soldiers had ever seen. A guerrilla battlefield where the enemy was invisible. And when I say guerrilla battlefield, I don't mean like like monkey battlefield. What it is it refers to an area of like an environment where guerrilla warfare takes place. So this is basically like irregular warfare. So it's like small groups of fighters who are often civilians or use like hit and run tactics. So they'll kind of just like ambush you and then just disappear and like they're gone. And the traps, we're gonna get into it all today. They start really clever, but then they get very dark. Today, we're going to ease into it. Then, for the brave ones who want to stick around and listen to something a little bit more grotesque and gory, you can listen to the stuff that still makes veterans shudder. Let me paint you a little picture, okay? Imagine this, okay? You're 19, I know, party, but no, it wasn't party, actually, it was really, really bad. So you're 19, you're thousands of miles away from home, you're in Vietnam, in the jungle. There's bugs everywhere, creepy crawlies, it's very scary. And the sergeant turns to you and basically says, whoa, watch the ground, watch the trees, don't touch anything, don't pick that up. So don't lean on that. So the Vietnam War is usually dated from November 1st, 1955, because that is when the US officially got involved in supporting South Vietnam. It ran to April 30th in 1975. First things first, okay? Let me just make something very clear. The Vietnam War wasn't fought by anything that the US had ever dealt with before, okay? Because it wasn't open fields and big tanks and uniforms lined up like we're here. Yeah. This was guerrilla warfare, like I just said. The enemy was invisible. The ambushes came out from nowhere. Nowhere. They had no idea. They had no idea where they popped up from. And the jungle. The Viet Cong knew, like, that was their home turf. You know, they knew where things were. So they completely used that to their advantage. I watched this documentary, right, and it said, and this American soldier was like, they could appear, like disappear, and then reappear in a heartbeat. I'm going to get into some traps, and then we're going to go and speak about something else, and then we'll get into the gory stuff. So I'm going to start it off, all right for yous. We have something called exploding trophies. Now, this was quite a devious situation because they knew that the US really liked their trophies. They liked helmets. They liked collecting enemy flags and things like that. So the Viet Cong were like, okay then, let's rig them. So what they did was they would literally booby trap, the flags and helmets and things that they thought that soldiers might pick up as trophies. Nobody knew what could potentially be set off, so it was very effective. They would have motorbike and vehicle decoy bombs. What they would do, they were very strategic. So what they would do is they would put them in places that they expected the US to clear. But the Viet Cong would rig them so that they would explode if they were mounted. It's not really like a tactic that is spoken about very much. Like, it's kind of like, but it was effective. Like, it did work. Something else they did was have a rubber band grenade trick. So we'll pull the pin in the grenade, hold the lever down. Sorry, but that takes some balls. Sorry. They would hold it down and then tie it shut with a rubber band. And then what they would do is they would hide it in a hut. And I guess what the US troops would do is that they would burn down the huts. So what they would do is when they left the grenades in the huts, if the hut was like burning, it would break the elastic band and then it would set off the bomb. So yeah, that's what happened there. They also had something called tripwire grenades. Pretty self-explanatory. Basically, they have, a grenade in a can with the pin pulled, and the edge of the can is keeping the pin close to the bomb so it won't detonate yet. And then there's a wire stretched across a trail. So if a soldier walks across the trail, triggers the wire, the grenade falls out of the can and then it explodes. All of these are really bad, explosions, awful, but it does get a little bit more squeamish from here. So now we're going to talk about the tunnels. When I kind of picked up on this story, it was actually on TikTok, and I came across a TikTok that said, the scariest thing about the Vietnam War wasn't the spiders or being in the jungle or being hunted. It was the tunnels. And I was like, what? Tell me more. And then I went down a rabbit hole of being completely submerged in the Vietnam traps and the tunnels, because what the hell is that? Tell me the traps and tell me about the tunnels. How did they do this? Basically, the tunnels is like an underground network. It's absolutely freaking crazy. These tunnels could spread from around 120 to 150 kilometers. So just to put that into perspective, because I was like, how am I meant to get my viewers to wrap their head around this incredible distance? So I had a little look at football pitches in the UK, and basically, you know, it varies from 120 to 150 kilometers. So what that would be is 1,200 to 1,500 football pitches. UK football pitches, not soccer, not American soccer football. To help you visualize, if you're driving about 60 miles an hour, which is the UK speed limit, it would take you like, if you were doing 150 kilometers, it could take you like an hour and a half to get from, you know, your starting point to your finish point. That is a long way. That's a long way. Who is building that? And what are they using? How long did it take them? I watched a documentary and this man was in one of the tunnels, and he said that the tunnels, like the specific one that he was in, was around 80 centimeters tall and 50 centimeters wide. I don't really know what to say because a ruler's 30 centimeters. So these tunnels were small. They were small. Small. Not a claustrophobic dream, let me just tell you. Yeah, you could not turn around in that. Like, you couldn't stand up. You had to, like, kneel and crawl. Oh, awful. So claustrophobic. And to make things worse, it was pitch black. I'm not doing that. Do not think so. And just to, you know, sprinkle a little bit of something else, it would be really smelly. So it would smell like, you know, wet dirt. That was nothing though. Decomposing bodies and death. And if that wasn't enough, of course you're underground, right? You're underground. Bugs, spiders, bats. You might also be thinking, how the heck did they have like ventilation through these tunnels? What they would do is they would have ventilation tunnels and they would cover it up with like a big fake termite mound is what they would call it. But these tunnels, the ones that I'm speaking about, were the coochie tunnels. And yeah, they were completely genius, to be honest. They had angled passageways, and what they would do is they would like live in these tunnels for months at a time. Instead of just like, you know, popping in and out as somewhere to hide, they would actually stay there. And how they could access these tunnels, I don't even know what to tell you. Literally, the whole ground was brown leaves, okay? This man found a random patch of leaf and took it up, and it was a trapdoor. It was a trapdoor into the tunnels. How do you know where that is? But they did. Not sounding like a completely pleasant experience, you know, being in the dark, claustrophobic, having to kneel and crawl everywhere. And, you know, it's covered in bugs, it's covered in bats. Also, you can't speak to the outside world. How are you going to do that? No radio. You're down there alone. And you can only go single file if you're going in with people. Nobody wanted to go into these tunnels. So how did they decide? Well, let's be real here. The US soldiers were on average so much bigger and taller than the native Viet Cong people. What they would do is send in their smallest soldiers, around 5'6", and they called them tunnel rats. And what they would basically be armed with is like a pistol, a torch, and a knife. And that was the other thing. Remember I said it was dark in there? They tried out head torches for a while. Bad idea. Because if somebody was waiting in the tunnel, target. Easy target. You know exactly where their little head is. But anyway, their object was to clear for traps inside the tunnels, because yes, what they did was not only have you got all this, you know, environmental factors of the tunnel, they would put traps in the tunnel. Like tripwires. They would put explosives in the tunnel. Imagine you're a tunnel rat. You find an entrance, so you go in and you're like crawling through. You don't find anything yet, but you come to like 3 different ways. So you can go left, you can go right, or you can go straight ahead. Let's say 2 out of these 3 tunnels have got a deadly surprise in them. One's got vipers hanging from the ceiling, and the other one's got explosives and a tripwire. And then the other one will take you to the kitchen. that is like a real situation that could happen. So yeah, one wrong turn, game over. So what these tunnel rats did was they had to clear the traps. They had to find the enemy soldiers, and they were supposed to gather intel and navigate the underground mazes with zero visibility. They did have the torches. They could work it to their advantages sometimes. They would aim it at the floor or like at the roof, and light would bounce off, and so if there was somebody there, it would be kind of confusing. When they established, this specialized group of people who were the tunnel rats, who kind of got their own gimmicks and their own ideas to trick the Viet Cong, if you will. Sometimes they like opened an entrance, would put a light in, and then, if somebody fired back, they would know somebody's in there, like things like that. Can I just stress that this was thought of as like basically a suicide mission? If you went into these tunnels, there was a very, very low chance that you were going to come out of them alive, because not only did you have, all of these traps, you sometimes had, an actual person inside the tunnel waiting for you to come in to attack you. You also had all these insects and bugs and traps, and also it was like psychologically messed with you. Like you can't go backwards, like you can only go forwards. If people went in behind you, you'd get stuck. Oh, it sounds horrendous. So when it did work, the tunnel rats, they found huge lots of ammunition. I can't say ammunition. Yes. Yeah, they would find ammunition, they would find murder plots, they would find plans. And, they would try gassing the tunnels. They did try to do things to ruin the tunnels, but they had trapdoors inside the tunnels. So people could just like, the Viet Cong could just like block the gases. And then all it really did was create like a big massive cloud of dusty, I don't know, smell. And it was just like annoying. So it was like there was actually no point in doing that. But yeah, the Viet Cong would do everything in these tunnels. They would sleep, cook, chat to their mates. And so these trapdoors make a lot of sense as why the Vietnamese could just pop out whenever they needed to and disappear just as quick, because they had the trapdoors. I know. It makes so much sense, doesn't it? Okay, guys. I'm afraid this is where we get onto the squeamish section. So if you do not like squeamish things, I don't want to give it away, but you don't have to watch this. You can just, go on with your day, and that can be how you choose to do it. However, you can also just stay, see how far you get. So we're going to talk about the traps, the pain traps, okay? These were painful, violent traps. A lot of them are absolutely violent, disgusting, and gross. A major part of these traps were the razor sharp stakes, okay? Now, these were usually made of like bamboo, and they were really sharp. So they were resourceful queens. They used what they had. They didn't have, I don't know if they had like big machine guns or whatever, but they definitely didn't seem to have any tanks. So what they would do is they would make these really sharp spikes, and then they would put some poop, put some poo, put some feces on it. Sometimes human, maybe some animal feces on there. And what they would do is if it ever punctured anything, it would increase the risk of infection. This name that I'm about to say of a trap already makes me feel unwell. It's called the toe popper. I'm sorry, it's already not good. It's already not good. We have a bamboo tube with a nail and basically a 50 cal shell, which is something that fires out a bullet. So if a soldier steps on it, basically the shell fires upwards and destroys the foot. That's why it's called the toe popper. And it doubled as an alarm system, because obviously that would go off if somebody stepped on it, boom. And then the Viet Cong could be alerted that they were nearby, because obviously you're like, ah! So yeah, they could attack you and ambush you from there. But then we also have got mines. So these mines were a foot long and 30 pounds in weight. These fired metal fragments up about 200 meters into the air. And these were triggered by tripwires. And if you got caught with one of these, you're not going to be alive. Like, this is awful. Let's just say there would almost be nothing left. Anybody that saw this, you're not going to be the same again. These are the ones that really make your toes curl. Ugh. So you've got the spikes again. So what they would do is they would have a wooden board with huge nail spikes. So if a soldier steps onto the board gives way, and then bam, the nails from the board would like close up into the soldier's leg. So what they would do, right, with these traps, they would dig a hole and then they would fill it with the spikes and then cover it with like foliage, like leaves, and just make it look like a regular walkway. So if a soldier stepped into it, they would fall right through it and the spikes would stab into their feet. If that wasn't already painful enough, sometimes what they would do is they would have the hole in the ground and then put the spikes facing down the way, so that when a soldier's foot went into the pit, and then, you know, like your natural instinctive reaction is to like, oh no, I've dropped my foot. Oh no, I've got my foot stuck. You pull it out. The spikes would stab into their feet. So what else would happen is their foot collapse traps. So they were hinged boards. And again, you had a hole, and then you had like a hinged wooden board that would swing if it was stepped on. You know, it would just keep going round and round and round and round. So what they would do is they would, you know, level it out, balance it out, and it had spikes on the bottom, so that if you stepped through, let me do the maths in my head. Like, if you stepped on the wooden board, you were getting slapped with those spikes right on your leg. Agonizing. And then you got, excuse me if I say this wrong, but the punji pits. And basically that is when these spikes, they were not just little ones like for your feet anymore. These were massive, long bamboo stakes. And what they would do was they would have these pits, and they would hide them again under thin layers of grass and leaves, and people would fall in them, and it would impale soldiers' bodies. And also what they would do was they would hide these big, massive, long stakes in long grass, so that if the opposition like jumped out and ambushed them, you know, in like a tactical way, like, oh, we're going to attack you, then they would dive into the long grass. And while doing that, they could potentially impale themselves with the long bamboo stakes covered in poo. Oh, it's so brutal, isn't it? Like, many people didn't survive that. I mean, take a foot trap and then supersize it. You also had snake pits. So again, digging those holes. Someone is getting really strong from digging all those holes. You'd get bamboo vipers, who were called the two-steppers. And then basically why it's called the two-stepper is because people that were, you know, would step into the pit, be bit by the snake, would allegedly only walk 2 steps before they drop dead. Now, that is an exaggeration. That isn't exactly what would happen, but it just gives you an idea of how deadly this actually was. They were designed to terrify, check, and then kill silently. Again, check. This is the one that really gets me. They all get me, but like this one, it's called the bamboo whip. And what they would do was they would take one spike of bamboo and then really pull it back and create heaps of tension on it, and then maybe like tie it to a tree or something, and then make it a tripwire, basically like make it a booby trap. And then they would put spikes on the end of it, so that if somebody tripped on the wire, it would cause the bamboo string to be let go of, and it would whip round, smacking somebody with these spikes, and it would just come out of nowhere, smack them, impaling their body with spikes. I know. It got me. And what they would also do is they would have tripwires for grenades, and then crossbows as well. have crossbows, but of course dipped in the feces. And these traps were born from necessity. Like, let's be real, the weaker force was using every tool available, and they demonstrated human creativity in horrific circumstances. The psychological toll was as significant as the physical injuries. And, now the tunnels, they still exist and they're tourist attractions. But they're sanitized and, child safe versions and things like that. But the true story is far darker and way more brutal and deeply human. So yeah, besties, the Vietnam War was brutal, but the traps, the tunnels, and the psychological horror, that was just on a completely other level. And honestly, researching this gave me a whole new understanding over how terrifying guerrilla warfare really is, and how far humans will go in war on both sides. But listen, bestie, let's just take a moment here and really feel what all of this means. Like, this isn't just traps and tunnels. These were real people with real lives, and around 2 to 3 million Vietnamese civilians lost their lives. Over 1 million North Vietnamese and Viet Cong fighters, 250,000, so 250,000 South Vietnamese soldiers, and nearly 58,000 US troops never made it home. That's not even counting the thousands from other countries caught up in the chaos. But to put it into perspective, that's roughly 5 to 10% of the Vietnamese population at the time. The war didn't just take lives, it destroyed the country. Villages were burnt down, cities were bombed, forests and farmlands were destroyed, leaving millions homeless and struggling to survive. Entire generations grew up surrounded by wreckage, unexploded bombs, and trauma. The US went in to stop communism, to follow the domino theory and to defend democracy, but by the end, the North Vietnam had won. The country was reunited under communism, and the US left defeated. Their goals were unfulfilled. It was a war that left a scar on not just a country, but on everyone who lived through it. Families shattered, communities destroyed, lives stolen. So many people paid the ultimate price for a conflict that left no one truly victorious. It's a tragic reminder of the human cost of war and of how messy and complicated and heartbreaking history can be. So, on that note, thank you so much for listening with me today. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and you can also see me if you want to watch the episode on YouTube. It's at History in High Heels _ the podcast. You can also catch me on TikTok. I don't post on there very often, but I am planning on doing it very soon and getting a bit more into that. It's at History in High Heels the pod. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please rate the podcast, leave a comment on YouTube if you want, or just interact with me on my socials. I love hearing from you, and you can tell me what episodes you want to see next. I can't believe that we're halfway through season 1 already. Thank you for being here and sharing this historic journey with me. My name is Elsie May, and you've been listening to History in High Heels. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. See you next time. Bye-bye. See ya.